Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. It's a wet day here in Ireland. I don't know what it's like where you are, because I know we have people from across Europe, which is great, which is something that we don't usually get at our Dublin events. So welcome to you all. We have a really interesting morning for you for the next hour. We are discussing Europa Cinemas in Ireland. There's only a handful of cinemas in Ireland that are affiliated with Europa Cinemas. And we have Fatima Djoumer from Europa Cinemas here to talk to us about the situation across Europe. And then we are going to talk to Charlene Lydon from Element Cinemas. They are over the Lighthouse Cinema in Dublin and the Pálás Cinema in Galway. We have Maeve Cooke from accessCINEMA. And then we also have Ross Keane from the Irish Film Institute here in Dublin as well. So first of all, I'm going to pass you over to, I'm going to bring up on screen, we have Leona Cully, who is our digital and communications manager here at Creative Europe Desk Ireland. And she's just going to talk to you about some housekeeping stuff to keep this all going. So Leona.
Hi, welcome everyone. So please feel free to use the chat function the whole way during the presentations, and at the end around 11:50 I will ask the questions from the panel, and just know please use the Chrome browser if you're having any problems, and make sure to use headphones for the best experience, and enjoy.
Okay, thank you, Leona. So Leona's going to be coming back on towards the end of it with any Q&A, any questions that come up on the chat. So we'll deal with the questions at the end. So first of all, I'd like to introduce you to Fatima. There we go. Fatima Djoumer. Hey,
hello.
How are you?
Thank you for the invitation.
So, yes, very welcome. Welcome to Ireland virtually. So yes, I'd like to pass it over to you to talk to us about Europa Cinemas and what Europa Cinemas is about, and then we'll go into all the challenges and things about, you know, the situation across Europe at the moment later on in the event. But first of all, explain to us, please, what Europa Cinemas is.
Thank you, Ola. Thank you really for the invitation to join this webinar. Well, in a few words, I think many people and many professionals who have joined us today may know about Europa Cinema, but I can do a very short introduction about what we represent. Europa Cinema, it's a network of cinemas all over Europe, which has been created approximately 28 years ago, and the main task of, what we are doing actually is that we are supporting, bringing a financial support to cinemas, to exhibitors who program a significant number of European films. We've been created in the framework and
I think, Fatima, you've got a bit glitchy on us here. Well, Fatima is coming all the way from Paris, so maybe that's that comes with the territory, unfortunately. Oh, there we go. You're back. Yeah, all good.
Okay, so you couldn't hear me before, or
just there, just for around 5 seconds. Yeah. The joys of technical issues.
Okay, now it's I don't.
Yeah, you're okay now.
Yeah, okay, fine. So I repeat again.
We'll try.
So Europa Cinema is a cinema network, and we've been created 28 years ago in the framework of the Creative Europe program, which has been supporting us since, as I said, the beginning, and increasing our budget every year to enable us to, let's say, host more and more cinema inside the network. We are bringing and we are giving a financial support to the cinemas which are devoting most of their programming to European films. We've been created, of course, to enable, this is one of our main objectives, to increase the circulation of European film outside the country of origins. And what we do as well, because let's say the title of this webinar is New Audience Strategies, is that we, of course, in the framework of our support, 80% goes for the programming support, and 20% of the support goes for activities targeted at increasing the, let's say, the young audiences in the cinemas and creating new audiences. So we count today more than 1,200 cinemas all over the places, which we are working in not only in the countries of the European Union or in countries linked to the media program, but all over Europe, because we are working as well with Eurimage, and the French Film Center, which is as well a supporter from the start of Europa Cinema. And so we are present in 43 countries of Europe. Should I explain how the financial support is, or is it too much details?
No, I think a good overview, because I think it's important to show how Europa Cinemas is supporting cinemas and independent cinemas across Europe. Okay. So just a good overview.
If you want to become to receive this financial support, you have to apply. We have the possibility. You have the possibility as a cinema exhibitor to apply every year, and we have, of course, deadlines. But still, we are very open because we have many country offices inside the staff of Europa Cinema who can give some information to all exhibitors interested in our work and in our incentive funding. So when you apply, you have to fulfill certain kind of criteria, but I'm not going to get into the details because everything is available on our website. But otherwise, you can, if you accept it, you can go from 15,500 euro for one screen to more than 60,000 euro for a cinema having more than 15 screens. So it just actually the support is given to the cinema on a yearly basis. You don't have to apply each year to stay inside Europa Cinema. You apply once, and as soon as you have applied and been accepted, you can, of course, get your support. You have to send us your programming results and all the results and the proofs of your young audience activities, and they are examined by our staff, and then you get the financial support very few weeks or few months after you've sent us your reports. So that's the way we've been working. We are bringing as well a lot of, let's say, technical support to the cinemas. Since the beginning of Europa Cinema, we have launched joint activities to really strengthen the network and structure it, and let's say, improve the relationship between people from all over Europe. We are organizing. We started with an annual conference, which was gathering. The first one was in, I remember, 95, and we had like 150 exhibitors from all over Europe. Now we are hosting 700 people from all Europe, and even from the United States and other countries in the world. We are doing a lot of training activities in the framework of audience development and innovation labs, which enable exhibitors to exchange information and best practices, because I think it's very important. We are having a Europa Cinema label where we have a jury of exhibitors, so they can meet on a very small level, but they stay friends forever after that, after this experience. So I mean, we are doing a very large scale of joint activities, really to really strengthen and enable exhibitors to really, let's say, improve their skills and improve their day-to-day work, improve their results, learn something new, be innovative. Well, I hope I've told enough about.
I think that's great, Fatima, because I think that's a very good overview of it. But it also shows how important Europa Cinemas is, not only financially. Because I think, you know, some people might think that, you know, Europa Cinemas is just a financial support to the cinemas, but that collaboration and that building relationships across cinemas, especially in this time, even before COVID, I think it was important to start building up those relationships between cinemas, because every cinema is going through pretty much the same issues across Europe. So sharing best practices and all that is a very important part of it. So thank you, Fatima. We're going to go and have a quick talk to the others, and we'll be back to you in a minute. So if you can turn off your camera there, and we'll go over and we'll meet Charlene. And Charlene Lydon is the programmer. There she is. Hi, Charlene.
Hi.
Charlene Lydon is the programmer with Element Cinemas. So, and they run the Lighthouse Cinema in Dublin and Pálás Cinema in Galway, which unfortunately at the moment are closed. Yes, due to us being in level three in Ireland. So I'll pass you up to you, Charlene, if you want to give us an overview of what operations should look like for starters. You know, like back in February, how did you guys work? How was Lighthouse and Pálás working?
So Lighthouse is in Dublin and Pálás is in Galway, which for anybody who's not familiar with Ireland, they're on the opposite sides of the country. And Lighthouse has been open for around, nearly 10 years now. And Pálás opened 2.5 years ago. So it's quite new. But so I'm programmer for both of them, but also Volta.ie, which is our video on demand platform. And I suppose that the thing that binds them together is that they're very similar in terms of programming, very broad scope of films that we play in both cinemas, but also Volta is specialized as well. So we specialize in independent cinema from around the world. We also play a lot of classic films. So when we had to close in March, it was obviously quite a blow. But we spent a lot of that time working on a plan for reopening so that everything would be in order and that everything would feel very, very safe for people, but also something that would really make people remember their love of cinema, because we're all very conscious of like people have been sitting in their homes and there's so many really good options there for streaming and so much available to people. And we were also like, probably people have upgraded since their home cinema systems. So we just really wanted to make sure that everyone remembered why they loved cinema in the first place. So we worked really hard on that. And we reopened both cinemas so we could have opened them at the very end of June, I believe. But we waited about 3 weeks because we wanted to get everything in order and we wanted to get our staff back for a week or two to train them in everything that they would need to know in post-COVID cinema working. And obviously like just the really basic stuff of ordering food and popcorn and the likes. So when we reopened, it was towards the end of July and we had a really nice reopening, actually. I was really pleased to see that people did want to come back to the cinema, which is the most important thing. And obviously we have social distancing in place. So in Ireland, it's 2 meters. I know it's 1 meter in the UK. I'm not sure about other countries, but it's 2 meters. So obviously our capacities are extremely low. So we're talking like, depending on the layout of the screen or whatever, it's kind of like 25 to 30% capacities, which is very difficult to work with. But I'm happy to say that those capacities were pretty much full most of the time. So at least there's that. So yeah, and in Pálás we also have a restaurant and a bar, and in Lighthouse we have a cafe and a bar. So they're also kind of businesses that are affected by this as well. They're sort of separate.
And they would have been, I mean, the restaurants and the cafe, I mean, that was a big resource for the big source of financial resource, I presume, for the cinemas, but even before COVID. Like, this is back in the day.
I know.
Yeah.
So one of the things we noticed was that in the Lighthouse specifically, we had a lot of people come in for lunch from the neighbourhood offices, who are all working from home now. So lunch trade when we were open was really much lower. But also we found, because people were wearing their masks throughout the building, they didn't really stop to look and get enticed by a brownie or a coffee or whatever. So it was a little bit like that was having an impact on what people were buying in terms of concessions as well. So yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Charlene. We'll come back and we'll talk about all the different challenges now. Or in a few minutes when we bring everybody back in. But I'm just going to pass you over now to Maeve. So bye, Charlene. See you in a few minutes. And we will bring Maeve up. Hang on. Here we go. Hi, Maeve. So Maeve Cooke is with accessCINEMA. So Maeve, if you can talk to us about what accessCINEMA is for those who aren't familiar, because it's not like the IFI or the Element Cinemas. It's not exactly the physical cinema as such. It's a different construct. Now, we can't hear you, unfortunately.
No.
There we go.
Sorry.
There we go.
Sorry, everybody. So yes, accessCINEMA is essentially a countrywide network in Ireland. Some of you may hear about things like mini networks. Essentially what it is and what accessCINEMA does is we support a mini network of different types of organisations across Ireland, largely in the Republic of Ireland, but we do have some sites in Northern Ireland as well. And those different organisations are largely made up of either art centres or what we call mixed programme venues, where film is part of an overall artistic programme. Also film clubs, so film clubs and film societies where screenings are run by volunteers on a regular basis. And then also some independent cinemas who screen commercial content as per normal, but then would work with us around other types of content. So essentially, the remit of accessCINEMA is about ensuring that audiences around the country have the opportunity to see a wider range of cinema than what is in their local cineplex or multiplex or whatever. So that historically would have been foreign language film, but now that has broadened to be international, independent, any type of cinema that a local audience wants to see. And then we as an organisation support that activity by actually acting on behalf of all of these organisations, because they are really what we call part-time cinema venues for the most part. They're not like IFI or Lighthouse or Pálás. They're not showing film on a full-time basis. At most, they might be screening international or European film once or twice a week. So therefore, they may not necessarily have the resources or indeed the expertise to actually source the types of films that they may want to share with audiences. So we act as a central point between all of these different organisations and sites and all of the rights holders that have the rights for the various different films. So we provide programming advice, audience development advice. We work one-to-one with each of the individual sites on pulling together their different film programs on a regular basis. And currently we work with just over 80 different sites around the country. So that keeps us out of trouble for the most part. Of those 80 sites, 20 of them are work from DCP format, so from regular cinema format, and it is those 20 sites that are part of the Europa Cinemas network. And then the rest of the network is composed of organizations that are working from non-DCP format, so typically screening from Blu-ray. So the organization and the activities that we do is very much centered around this idea of providing choice and access to a range of cinema, a range of culture in cinema format. And that activity is supported by the Arts Council here in Ireland, who are our principal funder. So that's essentially what we do.
So you're in 80. So there are 80 sites across Ireland.
Yes,
that's pretty impressive. That's like a mini Europa Cinemas.
Well, yeah, maybe not as many as Fatima has to deal with.
No.
But yes, it has. Since I started in accessCINEMA, at that stage there was about 40 sites. So in the last 10 plus years, there has been an explosion, if you like, of interest, which has corresponded, I suppose, to both advances within technology and also just different economical and social factors. For example, when the recession back in the end of the 2000s hit, we saw quite a lot of new film societies been set up as people wanted to stay local and wanted to concentrate on their community and bringing, kind of the idea of culture within that community. And then that has also, within the different art centres, that has become, they as cultural hubs have become, kind of that focal point as well within various different regional locations around Ireland.
Very good. I think we're very strong. I mean, I think that makes sense because in Ireland we've always been a very strong cinema going public. I mean, if you go into a small town, any small town in Ireland, you will see the building.
Yes.
That used to be a cinema. It might not, but it might be a supermarket now or a garage or something. Yeah. But you recognize the shape of the building and you know that. So there was a cinema in every small town in Ireland. So so this makes sense that this is bringing this back to a certain degree.
Yeah, there is.
Okay. There. Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Okay, well, thank you, Maeve. And we'll pass straight over to Ross in the IFI. Hi, Ross.
Hi, how are you, Orla? Good.
I'm good. Okay, so Ross is the Chief Executive of the Irish Film Institute in Ireland. So I'll pass you over and then you explain to us what the IFI is all about.
Thanks, Orla. Yeah, well, for anyone who doesn't know the Irish Film Institute, we're essentially the national cultural institution for film in Ireland. And we have three core areas that we look after. That's exhibition, preservation, and education. So from an exhibition point of view, we present the best of Irish and international work, mainly art house and independent cinema. We do that at our 3 cinema venue in Dublin, in the IFI in Dublin. But we also run programs around the country through IFI National. And through IFI International, we present films, Irish film programs in festivals and events all around the world. We generally work with around 100 different festivals across 50 different countries every year. So big, extensive reach for Irish film internationally. From the preservation point of view, we look after Ireland's moving image and film archive and film collection. So we preserve everything from 1897 up until the current day. That equates to about 30,000 cans of film, about 10,000 broadcast tapes. It charts everything about Irish life, every film ever made, anything that charts our cultural, social, political history is preserved in climate-controlled vaults at the IFI and at a second archive facility that we have in a neighbouring county out at Maynooth University. So that sort of looks after our preservation remit. And we also in 2016 launched the IFI Player, which isn't geo-blocked for anyone who's looking in from countries around Europe. And that's a window into the treasure trove that we preserve in the IFI Irish Film Archive. So people can look at that on the IFI Player, free to access. Then from the education perspective, we provide learning opportunities for people of all ages and backgrounds. We do this mostly through an extensive schools program for primary and secondary level school across Ireland for all ages. Basically, again, people who don't know the education system in Ireland, at first and second level education, it's essentially connecting film up with every subject right across the curriculum here in Ireland and providing study guides, resources for teachers and training for teachers and providing school screenings right around the country. So not only in our main venue in Temple Bar, but with partner venues right around the country as well. And then we also offer lifelong learning opportunities also. So we would present evening courses and other areas for critical engagement for adults and people of all ages as well. So quite a broad remit that we look after.
Great. Yes, a very broad remit. And you have a couple of festivals on this month, I think, or one last month, and you've got the Horathon coming up. You're very busy this month.
Yeah, like so as part of our exhibition, like we show new releases, we show classics, we do seasons, retrospectives. As you said, we curate and produce our own festivals as well. This time of year is very busy for us in that. We just finished the IFI Documentary Festival. We now are about to do IFI Horathon at the end of this month. In November, we move into the IFI French Film Festival. So lots coming up of festivals, which keep us very busy as well.
And it's great that you've been able to continue them, even if we are, even if we can do it virtually, it's you can still continue with them.
Exactly. So yeah, we closed the doors originally on March 12th for at the time of the first lockdown. But in that time, and I know we'll probably talk about this in a while, we have developed an online platform, so IFI at Home, which is a new VOD platform that was researched and launched, developed all in this period. So we launched it in July of this year. So we've been able to continue to deliver all of our programs, our new release programs, our festivals, etc., since we're closed down again now since the 18th of September, when this new level 3 kicked in for Dublin, some more restrictions for cinemas opening.
Yes. Okay, well, thank you, Ross. Now, if everybody else can bring their videos back up, and then we'll talk about the challenges that that you're all facing at the moment. So I think, Charlene, you already started talking there about, so I think if we talk about the impact on the day-to-day operations, back to basics, like, a day in the cinema in February looked very different to, obviously what's going on now. So I think Fatima, if she'll be there in a moment. But yeah, Charlene, so you mentioned there about, so you closed on, you all closed on what, March?
Yeah, it was like I think we closed on the 16th of March. 16th. Yeah.
Okay. And then reopened in July.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was a long downtime. And I do think, like, when we did reopen, I should apologize, the sun came out unexpectedly, so I looked like a ghost. So yeah, I should say that when we were reopening, I did really feel like we got off to a really good start, and we were just getting into a really nice rhythm, and then we got closed again. And with the news last week about Cineworld and the picture houses in the UK, I think it was really difficult for cinemas like us to process that news, because I felt quite hopeful, and I still do, but I feel like it's really upsetting to not be able to go in there and give it socks, because I do think people were coming back. So I guess the difference mainly between like February and July, August was that you don't have a buzz in the building, because you only have a certain amount of people in there. So, and same in the screen. So we had a few Q&As with directors and actors when we reopened, as a way of celebrating films that didn't get to have a cinema release when they initially were scheduled to come out. And I have to say, it was just quite a strange experience, because we had, say, 50 people in a 270-seater cinema, and trying to make a Q&A feel really vibrant was quite tricky. But I have to say, people were, happy to ask questions, and it was actually fine. But it's just that buzz that you get from having people in the cinema. That's really strange, to walk into a building and know that like every screen is sold out, but it still feels like an empty building. But obviously then that impacts people wanting to, have a beer with their friend before or after, maybe stay for dinner or whatever. People are a little bit more cautious. So all of that impacts the whole circle of life in cinemas. So that's been the main issue, is just, I guess, trying to make people remember why they loved us in the first place, while not being able to deliver atmosphere or that kind of community feeling that we really love, that buzz. But the fact is, they're there to see the films. So at the end of the day, they were happy to do that. And our staff obviously are all masked up, and so conversations aren't flowing in the way that they used to. But that being said, like we've made a really big effort to not make the place feel too sterile or anything like that, while also feeling safe and clean.
And Ross, you probably feel the same way. Does that echo how it's been in the IFI?
Yeah, like I completely share Charlene's thoughts on that. Like, when we reopened, as Charlene said, like we would have sold out screenings, but then when you'd walk into the screening and see what a sold out screening looked like, it was quite soul destroying because it still looked so empty. And even people like that would be going in, customers that we'd know well will come out and say, oh, it was a bit quiet today. And we'd be saying, actually, that was sold out. So that was our maximum capacity that we had in there. So that is quite alarming to see that and to see the impact on us. But having said that, like I remember the first day we reopened, we had people who were like sort of coming in who really wants to be in on day one. They wanted to support the cinema and they wanted to come back. And I suppose they knew that we needed them to come back and support us.
Yeah.
But there was almost some people had that in their heads. They wanted to be seen there on day one and going, look, I've come back and, I'm supporting, which was really lovely, actually. And, like, I suppose we all really miss that communal cinema experience and watching things with other people. As Charlene said there, like, it's just not really the same watching things at home. It's great to have all the viewing and the streaming platforms, etc. And it gives us other opportunities, and especially right now when everything's completely shut. But I suppose most of us here all are about the love of cinema and the love of that cinema experience and that viewing experience. So I think people were delighted to get back, even with the smaller numbers. Like maybe it hit us more looking and going, oh God, it seems very quiet. But I think for the people who were back, they really loved seeing something on a big screen again, even with a small number of people. We're so used to seeing nobody. So even sitting in a screen with 50 seems like a huge crowd now. So, but I think people really valued that, really, and they wanted to come back, they wanted to support, and they really enjoyed being back and seeing something on a big screen with other people again. There's nothing like it.
There is nothing like it, exactly. And Maeve, I mean, I know you're in it. It's a different time for your members, but how did they cope? How was that?
It's been a challenge, largely because I guess across our network, the screening scenarios are so different. You have some very large art centres all the way down to kind of smaller art centres. Then you have film clubs where some of them are screening in cinemas, some are doing screenings in partnership with art centres, but others then might be screening in a local community hall or a community centre. So essentially, the first sort of 6 weeks really was quite challenging in terms of having to or speaking to all of the different members, giving them updates on what was happening within kind of the cinema sort of environment, as opposed to kind of the general environment, and looking at what was happening. And then getting to the stage, and also the actual practicalities, because we book all of the films on their behalf, having to cancel all of those screenings. And I guess there was, with some of our members, and when you think back now to March and the conversations and what we didn't know at that point, there were conversations where, oh, well, maybe we'll hold off until after Easter to cancel something that was programmed for the end of June. And these were all at the time seemed like very reasonable, kind of conversations. So actually the process of cancelling and that the actual administration associated with that went on for some time. And then at that point, then kind of within the arts sector, Theatre Forum, which kind of is one of the lobbying bodies or one of the umbrella organisations for theatres, was working on guidelines around art centres. So we were keeping abreast of all of the developments around that, and also what was happening both in the UK with the UK Cinema Association and the guidelines that they were producing, and kind of I suppose the other organisations in UK and Northern Ireland that we would work with on a regular basis, and keeping in contact with all of the distributors, etc. So actually it wasn't, and then by the time we got to about June, and or not even June, probably the end of May, beginning of June, there was sort of inklings then of people starting to think about September. So then the whole process almost started again, and that was quite challenging in terms of, because at that point a lot of distributors had their, and we would work a lot with UK distributors as well as the main Irish distributors here, just given the nature of the content that our members screen. But a lot of staff were on furlough, so it was actually quite difficult to get in contact with staff at that point. But essentially, some of our sites started screening from the end of July. And up until the most recent closure, 25% of our network had restarted screening or were looking at considering screening from September onwards. The art centres, and it has been largely down again to the screening scenario and the screening setup. Obviously, where an art centre or a film society is programming or screening within a cinema, where all of the protocols and the precautions have already been rolled out, so to speak, that has been, kind of easier for those organisations to reconsider screening. But for those smaller film clubs, where they're doing it on a voluntary basis, the location that they normally screen in, again with restrictions in place and social distancing, etc., it might not be viable for them, alongside the responsibility of the health precautions that need to be taken. So in some instances, people are looking at going into hiatus until at least 2021. But it's an evolving situation. It's constantly evolving. And our job, our job is obviously to keep people updated and support them when they want to restart.
Yeah, and I think you're right about September. I think everybody had it in their head that the kids are going back to school.
Yeah.
So we'll all get back to work and everything will be fine. And then once September hit, it was a very strong realization that no, things aren't going to be like that. So it's very clear, and I think you've also touched on the fact that the challenges and staffing as well, and the supports that you are needed. So Fatima, I mean, does this sound like, is this a snapshot to you of what's going on in your 1,200 cinemas across Europe? I mean, does this sound familiar to you? And also, it'd be great. Like, I know that Europa Cinemas have put supports in place, so if you can talk, about that, that'd be great. Can you hear me? Turn on your mic. I think your mic is off.
Yeah. Okay. So sorry, I forgot to.
That's all right.
What we're describing is probably what a lot of exhibitors. I mean, I'm not going to talk for them, but of course, we are in contact with them, and the situation is all over Europe the same. I mean, there is no country. I mean, you were asking me about stats. I mean, some countries, like we did some, some statistics about how many days the cinemas in the network were closed. So we had from Norway, which the cinema were closed 55 days, to Chypre. I mean.
Cyprus.
You say it in English. Cyprus. Sorry, excuse me. Yes, I'm getting too French now. Cyprus, who has been closed 176 days. So, of course, I mean, I think that probably I'm not going to criticize the European Commission, because I think it's, health and education are, locally, let's say each country is doing its own policy in these fields, but of course there is a lack of coordination. I mean, you see right now some cinemas, they reopened and they don't have any limitations as long as you keep one seat between two spectators, and other countries where you can have only 30% of the capacity. I mean, there is different rules from one country to the others, but the problem is that all over Europe, they're all affected by the fact that there is no titles, no, let's say, big titles, because of course I understand the distributors, they're still, very not sure what's going on. You see what happened yesterday in France. From Saturday on, the cinemas have to close after 9 p.m. So it means there is no evening screenings, not all over France, but in the big cities in France. So it means that distributors who decided to release a film last week, next week, they might, rethink their strategy. And because if you don't have the big cities in France, what's the purpose of releasing a film in the smaller ones? I mean, I'm not talking for them as well, but I just want to say the situation is very serious. There is between cinemas, we asked cinemas to do some estimations, the loss they might have in terms of audiences and box office. And some people 2 weeks ago said, oh, we might lose, let's say, 50%. But 3 or 4 days after that, James Bond was cancelled, Dune was cancelled, Soul was cancelled, and many other films. And then new sanitary measures were announced. You are in lockdown in Ireland. We will be in France in a kind of lockdown situations. In the Netherlands is the same. So I was talking yesterday with a Greek exhibitor. He has been closed almost since March, you know. He reopened for one day and he closed again, you know. So it just, the situation there is, I mean, how do you want to engage with audiences if, you know, it's a perpetual evolving situation like this? I mean, fortunately, exhibitors and most of the Europa Cinema exhibitors and are very innovative, and I would like to congratulate for getting the Europa Cinema Innovation Prize this year, you know, for what incredible, you know, innovations they put in place in the cinema. I know that Maeve and Charlene very well as well, but he's the recipient this year. So
thank you, Fatima.
Yeah, but the thing is, you really need to be, I mean, very innovative to keep in touch with the audience, to create events which can attract as many people as possible. I mean, and fortunately, they are all, I mean, working, you know, on this kind of policies. It's we've been seeing during the lockdown that many cinemas in certain countries managed to organize what we call virtual screenings. In France, I don't know, like 40 cinemas were working with a company called La 25e Heure, and they created a virtual screening room where audiences could, like, going to the cinema a specific time, you know, and getting in the lobby. We have an exhibitor in the Czech Republic. He created his own screening room, you know, and created and in Hungary as well. I mean, you had many of these kind of experiences, and where, let's say, the cinemas kept, you know, the contacts and really were still engaging audiences to see films they were presenting, but not all of them did this, you know. And it's this is something. I don't know if I'm answering the question. It's a kind of frustration
no. Thanks, Fatima,
Europe,
because
you know?
It does sound similar, and I think that virtual cinema experience is something brand new to us this year, and how it worked. And I think, Maeve, you heard, because I know that you know, Ross, you talk about the IFI at home, and then Charlene, you got Volta as well, and also Maeve, you did the virtual cinema as well with that. How did that go for you guys?
So early on, I guess, sort of the end of March, beginning of April, we started talking to a couple of the, I guess, more specialist distributors that we work with in the UK, who had launched this virtual cinema initiative. It was largely modern films and also 606 distribution. And essentially the initiative was that they could facilitate virtual screenings. It came about actually from two of their releases, The Perfect Candidate and the German film System Crasher, were both due for theatrical release at the end of March, beginning of April. So they had to use that wonderful word, pivot, very quickly, and this was the initiative that they came up with to try and find a solution to get their content out there to audiences, but at the same time to try and support independent cinemas. So we got on board with that. And from our point of view, it was really important to be able to offer something to our members that would allow them to keep engaged with their film audiences. So, and we also did a virtual release of an Irish film, When All Is Ruined Once Again, that we had been planning to do a theatrical release on. So there was kind of 3 or 4 titles at the beginning that we sort of focused on and offered. And we had, the uptake was actually better than I thought. As you said, it was, for us, it was a very new area, and also for our members. It was an interesting process, just in terms of getting feedback from people, and also seeing, because I guess the whole area of digital and virtual has been with us for a while, and there have been various platforms. But it is still, for most people, it's still very much a sort of an unknown entity, even in terms of, and I guess that was one of the things that was really a learning point, was around how, in certain parts of Ireland, how bad the broadband is. So practical elements like the idea of offering and trying to engage with audiences, and that was, kind of the main priority with this. We knew that it wasn't going to be a money-making exercise for anybody. We wanted just to be able to ensure that they had quality content to offer their audiences. And the feedback we got was actually quite interesting from those that participated, in that they did see a strong participation at the beginning. And then actually, as the summer months came, they actually saw a sort of a correlation to how their normal physical programs would go, in that some of them would stop programming for the summer because people would usually go on holidays or whatever. And they saw that in terms of the virtual screenings as well, that once the good weather came and people were out and about when they were allowed to be out and about. But yes, it was, and actually that, a number of the sites continued doing the virtual screenings the whole way through. And even now we have a virtual offer. But yes, I think for us, it will always, as both Charlene and Ross said, the space we all want to be is within the cinema.
Is in the cinema.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
but this is a way that they can support the cinemas, because I'm sure everybody watching here is watching for a reason, because they want to get back into the cinema. And it's like, this is a way of supporting your independent cinema. And do you Ross, you already mentioned about the loyalty, that wanting to be there on the first day. Is that sense of loyalty much stronger? Do you feel it? Is it like, does it give you some hope that it's like, we'll be okay when we open back up?
Yeah, it does. We're seeing, as I said, the loyalty on that day one, and then in the days, that followed. But similarly with IFI at Home, so our new VOD platform, it's definitely the loyal IFI audiences who are using us, and who are online with us. But it's also given us great opportunities, like during, say, the IFI Documentary Festival, or more recently, the Gaze Festival, which was the LGBT festival here in Ireland that was going to be screening, but with ourselves at the IFI and also with Charlene at Lighthouse. And then that moved online into IFI at Home. But with those two festivals, it was lovely to see the online engagement, actually, just people on social media talking about film. And I think it really spoke to people's need to discuss film after they've seen it. And when you watch something at home, it's like, for years we've all been watching box sets and TV shows out of sequence with everybody else. You don't have the water cooler moments. But it was lovely to see that online, actually. People just talking about what they had just seen and having a conversation. And I think people really miss that. The thing we all took for granted, maybe, that you'd gather in a foyer of a cinema after a screening and everyone would be like chatting about what they had just seen. But like, you see the loyalty even online, people wanting to sort of still generate that sense of community and talk about what they've seen. So that's lovely to see, and it's encouraging to see as well.
Okay, but that's a good it's a very positive note. So Leona's here. I think there might be a couple of questions in the chat. So I'll pass you over to Leona. If you can go through them, that'd be great. You're muted.
Sorry.
I think we'll never get you.
Yeah, we have some comments and questions. So first of all, someone hopes that cinemas get all the support that they need because it's such an important cultural forum, which I think we all would agree.
Yeah.
And then Valeria had a question about, have cinemas reached out to or collaborated with distributors and production companies to engage audiences? Is that?
Yeah, and I think actually, and to link in with that, I think it's important there that you know, the impact, the fact that distributors are cancelling films, and the fact that they are pushing them into next year. I mean, that must be having a big impact. I know Ireland is closed right now, but across Europe, I mean, this, like the fact that James Bond has been moved to next year. I mean, this is going to have the smaller films as well. Like, how big of an impact is this going to have?
Well, I mean, it's been having an impact from like before any of us even opened, in terms of, I mean, Tenet was sitting in the middle of July for how long? And then when there was an indication that cinemas were going to start reopening, the less commercial and the independent and international kind of film distributors were all, there was a lot of sort of waiting to see in terms of release dates. Also, I guess a lot of the UK independent sites like the BFI, kind of Glasgow Film Theatre, Queen's Film Theatre in Belfast, a lot of those didn't actually open until the end of August, beginning of September. So it meant that you had a lot of the newer content. Again, the distributors were holding off on those films until they knew for certain that those sites were going to reopen. And then it all became about Tenet moved, and then, yes, and it's still in flux. It's constantly in flux, and it's actually becoming a bit of a log jam at the moment for October, November, December. So yeah.
Okay. And then someone wants to know more about your Europa Cinemas Innovation Prize, Ross. Could you tell us exactly what that is, please? Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. So, we were delighted to be awarded that prize from Europa Cinemas. Basically, it was for a film access project that we've been running over the last number of years. Primarily, that was looking at how to deliver a cinema to visually and aurally impaired audiences. So we did a major research project over a long period of time, and from that, sort of through various research focus groups with the audience with visual or aural impairments, a lot of discussions, and coming up with the framework of how to deliver a fully accessible program to those audiences. So the Europa Innovation Prize was in recognition of the work that had happened in that. It got a lot of international recognition, like we presented the paper and the findings from all of the research at international conferences, and then developed it obviously into our own program of what we're doing, and then made those findings available with the international cinema community and exhibiting community, so that they would be able to sort of learn and adapt the findings that we had sort of come out with as well. So it's a big project, something we're very proud of. I'd like the work that we've done in that regard of making cinema accessible to all and in as many ways as possible, and really delighted with the prize from Europa Cinemas. So thanks to Fatima and everyone at Europa Cinemas for that as well. So a lovely bit of good news in a period where we seem to be getting a lot of bad news all the time. So it's nice to have something positive to talk about for a change.
Okay, and then yeah, well done. It sounds amazing.
Cheers.
Okay, so here's that comment. Something we've noticed with the lockdowns and big film cancellations is a bit of a breakdown of the theatrical windows, with bigger chains being more open to releases that work with better streaming services. As a producer, we see that as a positive, but what do the panel think? So maybe Charlene might take that first.
Yeah, I mean, we've always been quite flexible regarding windows. It's never really bothered us, and as far as I've ever seen, it hasn't impacted people's desire to see a film on big screen. And I think a really interesting thing has been working with Netflix on their bigger titles that they've released, because, you know, if you look at something like The Irishman, which is obviously a huge film, I don't know if there was any time between it going. I think it was
2 weeks. Yeah, I think 2 weeks. Yeah.
And people came to the cinema, and they came to the cinema even after it was on Netflix. But then there's even kind of more specialist films like Uncut Gems, you know, that they were films that like people really wanted to see in the cinema. They could sit at home and watch them. They're already paying for it via Netflix, and they wanted to see it in the cinema. So, I mean, that's an extreme version, but it's never bothered me. A lot of Curzon's films go straight onto their platform. It's never impacted people's desire to see the film on the big screen. So in terms of, I think we're at a point where it has to work for everybody. You know, this system now has to work for producers, it has to work for distributors, has to work for cinemas. And I think the people who will make the choice to go see a film on the big screen will choose that, even if they can spend, you know, €15 to see it at home, or €11 or whatever. So I suppose it's like, I'd rather have the option. That's how I would look at it. So, you know, like the likes of the Pixar film Soul going on straight onto Disney Plus. Like I would love the option to play that film, even if it was on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
So that's what I would like. Ideally, I think flexibility is brilliant. I'm really happy to see the multiplexes kind of like opening up to that. But I do think what I'd really like to see is support for, you know, both releases, you know, so just that it's not, it's so that films just don't get lost. That's what we don't want. We want good films to find a home. And if it needs to be both available in cinemas and online, I think that's okay. And I think distributors know what films that suits and what it doesn't most of the time anyway. So that's my 2 cents.
Very good. Does anyone else want to answer that? Or
yeah, I suppose just from our point of view, because just given the nature of the network and the fact that we never really get anything day on date, to be honest. There's always a lag until we have access to titles, and particularly with our non-DCP sites, that conversation around a film potentially being available on home entertainment at the same time that they might be able to get access to it has always been a conversation for us. It has changed over the last number of years as, again, distributors have become, I guess, more open to having those conversations and giving windows or exclusive access ahead of home entertainment releases. So from that point of view, it's something that has always been in our world, so to speak. But I do think that distributors have, are looking and the idea of those, kind of the Netflix going into having theatrical releases, but also having added content. So, for example, the David Attenborough film recently, that was cinemas could have it, but there was added content with a recorded, well, originally it was supposed to be a live interview between David Attenborough and Michael Palin, but that added content isn't available now that the film is on Netflix. So there's a lot of, and as Charlene was saying, and Ross previously, it is very much about that people choose, I think, if they want to see something on the big screen. And that's always been the basis of our members, has been, it's very much about the shared experience, wanting to see it on a big screen. And people will make that choice regardless.
Okay. And I think that's always been the case. I mean, cinema has gone through an awful lot. When TV came out, it was in the 50s. I mean, they thought that was the end of cinema. And then it was videos and thought that was the end of cinema. And cinemas have always come back with, innovative ways of getting people in, getting bums on seats, because you can't take away from that, smell of buttered popcorn and, and the lights go down. And, I mean, it's a very special experience. And, and bringing your kids there when they're young so they can remember that. as they grow older, I always think, you know, is vital as well. So I mean, talking about that innovative and how cinemas like are constantly evolving, to you know, to keep that, to keep the people in. I know like Creative Europe, Creative Europe have had a couple of calls in the last couple of years about cinemas of innovation hubs. So the fact that cinemas can, you know, giving funding for cinemas who are doing something different, to create a community hub, you know, to use the cinema as different diversification. You know, that's the word. So you know, Creative Europe is constantly thinking about this, and I know Europa Cinemas have received an extra 5 million euros for support for, I think it's coming next year, to support those cinemas that have been pretty badly hit this year, which I think is every cinema. But yeah, so I think we need more funding for that. But I think we're coming up to time. So if there's any other questions, I would just like to thank you all very much for coming along today, and for everybody who's watching. And this will be recorded, Leona, isn't it? This will be...
Yeah, so we'll publish the video on our website and our YouTube channel.
Yeah, and we'll put up links down to all your, I know, Ross, you've got a name your seat sponsorship things, or there are different ways to support each of the cinemas. So we will post those links up as well, and also to Europa Cinemas. So thank you again.
Thank you.
And we'll see you soon in a darkened room. Someday
sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.